As the host of Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, I am delighted to be able to bring you this podcast. My name is Wendy Lopez, and I would like to introduce myself to you. I specialize in helping people overcome their emotional blocks through different techniques, through emotional empowerment coaching and compassionate healing light facilitation. As a mom who has experienced narcissistic trauma, I help moms eradicate self-doubt in order to regain self-confidence to elevate their status both at home and at work. In our podcast, we discuss people's struggles, triumphs, and failures. We dive deeper into self-love, self-compassion, self-acceptance, and mindful, holistic tips. In every episode, I hope that you can take a golden nugget of advice and apply it to the journey of motherhood in order to raise your level of awareness. Welcome to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, where you find healing and creative mental thought advice from experts on past pain, narcissistic experiences, and trauma. Today, I have Arielle, who's a physical therapist, yoga teacher, and postnatal coach turned mama coach after pushing through postpartum depression and pelvic pain and embracing the messiness of her journey. She now helps mom reconnect to mind, body, and soul so they can reclaim their identity in order to parent confidently, partner passionately, and ditch the mom guilt. Towards the end of the podcast, I'll have her share. She does have an 8-week program, and all her links are going to be available. So if you connect with her, definitely reach out to Arielle. So Arielle is joining us today, and we're blessed to have her. She has her little one with her. So if you guys hear her in the background, just know that she's got her little baby. And this is what the podcast is all about. We're moms on our journey with motherhood. So welcome, Arielle.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me. This is great. It's great to be here.
Yes. Can you tell us about your journey, about getting through a struggle or trauma, and then how you got here to your own business?
Sure, absolutely. So I would say it definitely started. It started with motherhood in my postpartum journey, which is kind of where my focus is. And initially, bird's eye view of everything. I would say, if I was asked, I would say I don't have a traumatic life. I haven't been through trauma, or learning now, like big T trauma. And I think to an extent that was kind of part of my struggle, looking back. So, because, again, bird's eye view, looking at my life, I can't complain. I do have a wonderful life. Christmas season, right, is on us, or just happened. But when you look into it, there are definitely, moments of ups and downs, and sometimes we don't necessarily acknowledge our downs, and we want to kind of turn a blind eye to them, or diminish them. And I feel like I'm probably not alone in that, where it's so easy to diminish our struggles, diminish what we would consider our trauma if we kind of evaluate it a little bit closer, because there's always kind of this thought in our head of, well, somebody has it worse, or how can you really complain about that when you have all this going on? And early on postpartum, those were the thoughts that were playing in my head. And that kind of fed into the postpartum depression that I had. So, yeah.
That's interesting. So prior to having the baby, you would say that your life, you've had a blessed life, right?
Yeah.
Right. Compared to like maybe other guests that I've had that maybe have had some sexual trauma, or
right, those like
emotional
really
abuse, like really. And so for you, it was more the start of motherhood.
Absolutely, it was more the start of motherhood, and the internal dialogue that I would have with myself, and catching on to that, of how much I would really beat myself up for the smallest of things.
Can you share to us about
Sure.
what internal dialogue you would have as a mother for yourself?
Absolutely. So I have two little ones right now. I did struggle with IVF for 4 years before having my son, and then I had to go through the IVF process again. Luckily, it didn't take another 4 years to have my daughter. But going through that, having my son, nothing went according to plan. And with him, he's my oldest, he's 3.5 now. I didn't have what would be considered postpartum depression, or at least I didn't have that label or that diagnosis at the time. My struggles postpartum were what I would consider normal, even though they were difficult. But after having him, so I planned on having a natural birth. I didn't want medication. I was in a hospital setting. I didn't want medication. I wanted to do it vaginally, and I thought I did all the right things preparing beforehand. As a physical therapist, I did some of the pelvic floor exercises and stretching and massage, all of that leading up to it to kind of have things go as smoothly as possible. Fast forward, that's not life, right? Things happen, and I ended up having a C-section with him. Ended up really struggling with our breastfeeding journey. And so initially the thoughts in my head right after having him, it was a lot of, was this supposed to happen? I struggled with IVF, so I didn't do that naturally. I ended up having to have a C-section, so I didn't have that natural birth. And now here I am struggling to breastfeed for no particular reason. There wasn't like a tongue tie or, any blaring issue that we were faced with. We were just struggling with it. And now I can't, so the thoughts in my head was now I can't even do this. And now I can't even so am I meant for this? And that was, again, what I would consider normal postpartum, angst or baby blues. I was able to move through it. I think it did help that after a couple months of perseverance, we were able to latch and had a really wonderful breastfeeding journey the remainder of our time doing it. But early on, there was those thoughts running through my head, and I didn't really think too much of it at the time, right? And so we kind of moved through things, and then I have my second, and things do go according to plan, right? So I was able to have a VBAC despite every time I went in for an appointment, it was okay, we know that this is what you want to do, but she's not quite in the right position, or because of your previous C-section where your placenta is lying, it's too low. We think it may be over the scar. That's not gonna work out. And despite all of that, things kind of shifted into the right direction. I was able to have a VBAC. She latched right away. We had a great, early breastfeeding journey. But yet, so now with her, though everything went smoothly, you would think, great, you're in the clear. And she was the one that I ended up getting postpartum depression with. Hindsight, did I have it with my son too? Probably, at least, maybe. I definitely wasn't very kind to myself early on. So I think that kind of, I was more aware of that the second time around.
Yes, right. And I love that you said that, you didn't treat yourself kindly. So there was an awareness, like you said just now, that there was an awareness of this internal behavior.
Yeah.
And so I find it so intriguing how that created a new pathway for you to look within yourself and deal with those issues or things that were surfacing up that are trauma, because when we're looping in the same thing, we're stuck in that little trauma there. So motherhood came to bring those things out that you already had, because it just magnified it in a certain way.
Oh, 100%. And for me, again, with the one to two transition, it just like doubly amplified it, which I think if you've had two close and together, you will notice that definitely amplifies the stress. It amplified a lot. And so for me, what it was uncovering is a lot of really negative self-talk, and a lot of perfectionist tendencies that I would never be able to live up to. And just a lot of like self-doubt, a lot of guilt. I felt like I was constantly failing my older son, then failing my daughter, just failing my family in general. And so it was tough, and it started to become more eye-opening to me with the two. I remember there was one day, and it was, the smallest of incidents, but I was getting my son at the time a glass of milk, and I was pouring it for him. And it's like the cup that I was pouring it into had slipped out of my hand, and it went everywhere. And it was, not ideal, but again, noticing the self-talk that I was saying to myself, I would not want to speak to him that way if he had spilt the milk. And I realized that, but sometimes I kind of do. Not necessarily, I mean, there were definitely profanities in my own head with the self-talk, so there wasn't that, but the reaction is the same, right? It's like that, how could you do this? Oh my gosh, what were you thinking? Like that, shame, that incompetence, and it's literally just spilt milk. It's not a big deal. But again, because of everything that was going on, again, this was early postpartum where I was really in the thick of it. So it was like those simple moments that I was starting to pay attention to a little bit more.
Yes. And like you said, the motherhood journey and the postpartum depression, that does definitely amplify. And if you said that you've had like perfectionism tendencies, that amplifies those perfectionism idea of how you should be as a mother, how things should be running smoothly in your day to day. So that's amazing how you were able to really be conscious about that. Because there was like it almost seemed like a little battle between you, like you were aware, and then this other side was like, the inner critic, just like talking and talking and talking.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to silence that inner critic, but absolutely, like, awareness is the first step, for sure. And I started, luckily my husband was very supportive, even though I took a lot of it out on him. With the depression, I had, postpartum rage with that, which I feel like is not as talked about. But again, then feeds into the negative self-talk. And as you mentioned, then you start to loop because you're reacting in a more aggressive, more forceful, you just feel all this angst, and it's coming out in not a very pretty way. It is coming out very vengeful and rageful. And I was taking, 100%, he was the target of that. And then it feeds into your head like, oh, well, if I'm acting like this, well, maybe those thoughts are correct. Maybe those, that inner dialogue, things that I've, heard when you're younger, where, you have outbursts or whatnot, and then it kind of validates that. But luckily my husband was helpful. We've had a lot of open communication on how I was feeling. Is this depression? Should I, start speaking to people about it? And so, yeah, I was able to start talking to a therapist about what was going on, which again started pretty early on. It was about between the 2 and the 3 month mark, probably a little bit closer to 3 months post, where I finally kind of gave into it. And again, because I think that it feeds into the perfectionist tendencies of like, no, I have this, I can do this, I don't need help. I don't want to accept help, or admit that I'm struggling. Because when you accept help, you have to admit that you're struggling. And that can be really hard to do when you feel like you need to do it all on your own, and you're supposed to be the one in control and in charge.
And I love that you just said that. When you accept help, that's acknowledging that you're struggling. Because I want to tell you how many times I have said the hardest person to help that will receive help are moms.
Yeah. And I think it's because we put this pressure on ourselves. And I think some of it comes from society. Like we're told all the time that we're super women. Oh, moms are superheroes. They're super women. And we're not. We're just normal people trying to keep it together, trying to do the best we can. But unfortunately, it feeds into like trying to be the perfect mother for our kids and trying to do it all and figuring, it all out and trying to bounce back and be the person that you were before. And you can't be. And I think that's really one, it's hard to admit. Yeah. And there has to be like a mourning period for that. But I think when we let it, motherhood and, the postpartum journey in particularly, I think it's really, really a gateway into who you truly are, because you can't hide from it. Like you're going to notice everything. You're going to notice all the self-talk in your head, whether it's the way that you're speaking to your kids or whether you're just starting to become more, aware of it. You can't really hide from it anymore. So it's like, it's there, it's in your face, you're kind of like shattered apart. And then it's a matter of, okay, well, do I live like this in this shattered, vessel and try to keep it all together as best I can and put on this mask of everything's fine, I can do everything okay. Or do we start to kind of collect the pieces and figure out a way how to make ourselves whole again?
Now, you mentioned about bouncing back and how that can hinder our recovery. I remember I'm not sure. I don't think I'm the only one. I think a lot of us want to bounce back to normalness. Can you speak to us about that with your expertise?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it affects us in a few ways. But first, if we're talking like just the physical, if we're trying to bounce back, we can really do our body a disservice because we have to recover, we have to heal. And postpartum, I hate to use the word should, but I'm going to say it here. Postpartum should be a time that we're recovering and healing. You wouldn't, break an ankle or sprain an ankle and then go back to running after just a short amount of time without doing anything. Like there needs to be a rehab phase. And that's no different with birthing a child, regardless of how that birth process happens, whether it's a vaginal birth or a C-section, which is a major abdominal surgery that we kind of gloss over. So if you're trying to get back to either one, if you weren't someone to work out before, but your body is different now, you feel foreign in it, and you start to try a new workout, or you were working out before and you're trying to jump into it too soon, it can lead to issues down the road, and that could be anything from back pain that you're feeling to pelvic pain to urinary incontinence, which could be either like an urgency incontinence where you feel like you have to like run to the toilet or you're going to have an accident, or like a stress incontinence, which is when you're coughing, sneezing, and a little bit of urine is leaking out. Now, those issues can happen regardless of if you push back too soon, but they are going to be more likely to happen if you don't allow for proper recovery first.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and then go ahead.
No, and so that was on the physical aspect. And then I believe also too with what you said about us, wanting to be super women. we want to bounce back to who we were. So we pick up like all our responsibilities again. And that's like what you said is part of control, right?
Yes. Yep.
So what we're really trying to
Absolutely.
what we're really trying to bounce back is our control.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have no control in motherhood. Which is why, I thought maybe my kids would be napping still right now, and they're not. So they're here with us. So because that's life. And there is never a time in life where you have absolutely no control like motherhood. And I think we try to then jump into these strict routines and strict schedules, and we try to really tighten the reins, or we jump into a strict diet all off the bat, and all those ways that we're looking to really grab onto control to make, again, to create that perfect, idealized, we've got it all together situation. And then they play off of each other too, right? The mental and the physical pieces can play off each other. So if you're stressing about looking a certain way and getting back to what your pre-baby body looked like too soon, and I'm not saying that there's not a place to want to, get back into working out, but we need to do that from the right intentions. We need to do that from a place of again, our body is healed and capable of the workload. If we want to have a breastfeeding journey, we need to be really mindful of that and making sure that we're not cutting calories too soon, because it will affect your ability to produce. But then it plays off, it feeds into the mental anguish that you're feeling, and you're fighting yourself, especially early on. I mean, it's pretty typical, normal, like between 6 and 12 months, that you'll start the process of really losing the baby weight. I mean, early on, yes, you have the baby that's gone and the placenta, and then you start to lose some water weight. So there'll be an initial drop. But a lot of times our bodies are really meant to hold on to that for at least the 6 to 12 months. And nobody wants to hear that or really acknowledge it. But we kind of have to. Otherwise, we're setting ourselves up for failure, because our hormones are all over the place. Our thyroid levels can be off. And then you're trying to either work out too aggressively or cut too many calories. And then your body wants to cling on to that even more. So you're not going to be successful. Or then you do things that are even more stressful. So it can be a lot. And I know for myself and for other people that it can be, it can be devastating when you're not seeing results. And then again, it can feed into that, I'm not doing this right. But no, you're just maybe not allowing it to happen. And again, letting go of that control piece.
Right. And can you talk to us about, because I think it's important too, to talk about postpartum rage. What does that look like? What is that? Like, how does that affect the couple?
Yeah. Yeah. So, so it is basically as it sounds. You're going to be having more outbursts. And they're going to be a little bit more aggressive. So your tone is going to be sharper. Again, it's those smaller tasks that are kind of triggering you, things that wouldn't have been an issue before. Whether it was the spilt milk or dishes left in the sink. I laugh because for me, an example that comes to mind is when my husband was trying to be supportive and helpful, booked me a pedicure like very early on. And I was very upset about it, like flipped out on him, because again, it's not something that normally would have set me off. But it did, because I felt like I'm not ready to be separated from my baby. And while that would have been true regardless of if there was the postpartum rage or not, I like to be really connected to them for as long as I can early on. And so I don't, go out right away. Some people do, and that's completely fine. But for me, what's comfortable for me is staying with them a little bit longer, and so like that probably like 30-minute trip would have been too long for me. In a different state, I would have just explained that to him and it would have been fine. But like in the rage state, it becomes like like blew up at him. How could you do this? You don't know me. Like just, way over the top. So that's kind of the best example that I think that I have about what it can look like. I mean, for some people, it can become physical also. So it really all depends. And it, you would treat it and work with it the same way as you would postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety. I think they're all very kind of interrelated. And I think a lot of the rage comes from, anxiety and depressive feelings that you're having at the time. And it's kind of, that tip of the iceberg, and then really getting into, okay, well, what's causing that bubble up of anger that you're feeling. And it can be simple things as like, you're not sleeping well enough, you're not eating what you're supposed to, you're not, getting enough water, like your basic necessities. And then it can also be other feelings, in my story in particular, like the feelings of not being good enough and that constant failure, not being able to reach those perfectionist tendencies that you're setting. So kind of peeling back the layers of the onion, digging deeper to see kind of what's lying underneath and then addressing those.
Yeah, so I find that interesting with the postpartum rage because, listening to you speak, I think I had that in the beginning. And I don't think, like you said, there's awareness on how that comes across. So when I had my first one, I had postpartum depression. And I think he was only like 3 weeks old. And like my husband, it was the first grandchild and they wanted to do a family portrait. And so I was fine with it. And then like I came home from getting like my hair done and I saw them holding my baby. Like they picked him up, like he must have been in my head. He was sleeping. They picked him up. I came in and I saw that and I blew a gasket. Yeah. So I don't think I realized that's postpartum rage. Well, the thing is that I had everybody go back home. Like no pictures were taken. We canceled it. I made my husband tell everybody to leave. And you know what? That was traumatic for my in-laws.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize not only was it traumatic for me, right? Because I'm the mom, my first time, and it's kind of like that mama lion comes out and it's like, what are you doing with my baby? Take her back. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had that rage and it's not talked about.
No, well, it's not talked about because we're not supposed to feel it. We're supposed to be just very loving and calm. And yes, I think, that's there. Maybe not the calm early on in postpartum. If you are one of those,
like we're supposed to hold it together. Oh
yes.
My gosh. That's horrible because see, that is what makes it seem like we're the bad guys. We're just trying to frickin' figure ourselves out again.
Absolutely. Right? Because there's so much to figure out. Your body feels foreign. It might be uncomfortable and in pain.
Yes.
Your body is physically healing.
Oh my God.
You don't really know who you are anymore. Especially if you've kind of really tied your identity to your profession, your relationship. Really, I mean, when you're a mom, you have this new relationship with your baby. So you're learning that relationship, but all your other relationships change. As you were mentioning, like your relationships with your in-laws may change a little bit. Your relationship with your partner definitely is going to change, at least initially. And as you were asking before, how does the postpartum rage affect, your relationship with your partner? I mean, I think it might speak to, I don't know the exact statistic, but early on, new mothers, the divorce rate after having a baby is actually pretty high. I mean, the divorce rate in general in our country is very high, but it's particularly high in that postpartum phase. And, I can't help but wonder, like, is that some of it, like, the mother doesn't know how to deal with what she's experiencing or even know that it's okay that you are going to be different for a little bit of time and you need time to heal yourself, mind, body, and soul early on, that you need that time to heal, and that should be allowed. You need to kind of give yourself that permission, and then have those open conversations with your partner that you don't necessarily, mean to be reacting. Of course, you're not going to have that conversation in that moment, but, coming back to it, circling back up, is definitely needed.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm almost feeling like we start getting to know ourselves once we have the baby. Like there's these different things going on. I think neurology wise,
Yeah.
I got certified in integrated behavioral health. It's where holistic and conventional mental wellness work together. And one of the things is that they did say that we get anxiety after having a baby. We get depression because there's chemical changes going on. And it just depends on the moms, right? Because we're all different. Like I might be super sensitive, you might be sensitive, but not as super sensitive. So it just really depends. So it's kind of like Russian roulette, right? We don't know who of the pool of pregnancy moms that you might have had is going to get it.
Right. Yeah. And so to your point, yes, our brains absolutely change. They change in pregnancy, and they change more so in postpartum. So our amygdalas, that area in our brain that is kind of responsible for our emotions, it enlarges during postpartum. Yeah. So obviously we're then going to be more prone to anxiety or anxious thoughts and depression. So it's absolutely very much normal to have that, but does that make it okay, or does that mean that we don't address it? So
I think this needs to be addressed because we're the ones that are trying to fit into something where we've had these huge changes in our mind, body, and system, and we're trying to normalize ourselves back, and that's the not feeling good enough and trying to deal with our own emotions that are on overdrive.
Right.
Yeah.
And learning that, for me, what I like to always say is that what's common isn't always normal, and what's normal isn't always okay, and that it is okay to seek help for even the things that are normal, because physically, let's take, urinary incontinence. It's extremely common after having a baby to have some level of urinary incontinence, whether it's just if you're laughing extremely hard or, or sneezing. It's a very common problem that women deal with. And it's so common that it's normalized, but it's not normal. It's not normal to have leaking after a baby. It's because we need to allow our bodies to properly heal and recover, which is something that we tend to skip over because we are in this huge bounce back state in society where we have to bounce back to everything. We don't allow time for that or even allow acceptance for it. And then to the emotional piece of it, it's very common and normal to have your emotional state change, whether it be just, and I say just here, but not in in the way that you hear it, like, oh, it's just the baby blues, you're going to have the baby blues. It's not clinical depression necessarily, like in quotes, that it's just the baby blues. But that's extremely common. And to an extent, having those emotional changes, especially very early on, that is normal. And it's because of the brain changes that you're going to have. But just because it's normal doesn't mean that it's okay. It's not okay to stay there indefinitely. And when do we consider seeking help? Like, do we have to wait for a problem, or can we address just being uncomfortable, even if it's common or normal? And for me, like, that's my big push. My big goal is that you deserve support, and you deserve care, and you deserve time to really heal, get to know yourself again, and really heal yourself because you deserve that support. And you don't need to wait for there to be a problem. And also, if you get the support early, you can then identify if there is a problem. You can identify if there is a problem sooner, so that you can seek maybe a different, avenue of support.
Right.
So that, because, that's a big problem too, is that a lot of times things are missed, or they're so normalized that people brush it off. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. This is just how it is. This is just, hashtag mom life. You're going to be a hot mess, but you don't need to be. Like, you can work through it and, a little bit start to embrace that messiness and move forward with it, and not be just stuck in it.
Oh my God. It's so true. Oh my God. Hashtag mom life, and we're a disarray. And we don't have to be that way. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you do what you do. Thank you so much. I honestly wish I had someone like that helping me, because it was definitely a total hot mess. And I didn't want to be a hot mess. I don't want to normalize it. I never wanted to normalize anything. I don't think anything of this is normal. This is why I have my podcast.
Yeah,
because it's not freaking normal. And we're accepting it. Like women have accepted the less than everything, when we're the ones birthing a human being, and then we get the short end of the stick. No, this is the support. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you do what you do. This is amazing. This is so needed in the world. We definitely need more of yous. Can you, before we end and close the podcast, can we get like a tip, something practical that moms can use, maybe for bouncing back in their mindset somehow, or maybe something physical? I don't know, with your expertise.
Yeah, I will say my biggest tip would be getting into your breath and starting to breathe properly. And that can address both your physical recovery and then also the mental piece of it. Because when we take the time to focus on our breath and slow down our breath, it changes your mental state. You can go from that really anxious state where everything's feeling really tight. Your heartbeat is beating a little bit quicker. When we slow down our breath, we can affect our heart rate, and that can in turn kind of trickle out to the rest of the body to feel more relaxed. It also provides space to start thinking a little bit clearer and start to notice what's going on. And then the physical piece of it is, as you're taking a bigger breath, you're changing the pressure in your system. If you're really holding onto your breath tightly, if you're not using your full lung capacity to breathe, then you're not really. So I'm just going to back up a second to maybe clarify it a little bit more. As you take a really big full inhale, your diaphragm drops down, it lowers down. Your pelvic floor should at the same time be lowering down. So they kind of move together. So if you're not taking a really full deep breath where you're engaging your diaphragm and you're really just using the accessory muscles of your chest and your neck to kind of take that really shallow, anxious breath. Then you're not engaging your diaphragm full enough, and you're not then going to be affecting your pelvic floor as well. So you want to think about like a full 360 breath. So really not just belly breathing, but also breathing into your back body and out laterally out the sides of your rib cage. So instead of putting your hands on your belly when you do a couple of deep breaths, you can either place them on your lower rib cage, or on the small of your back, kind of like where your kidneys are, so the lower portion of your ribs, and think about breathing in there as well. And you can kind of change up your hand position for each breath. If let's say you're doing 3 breaths, you can start on your belly if that is comfortable and familiar to you. Start there, then slide them over to the side, and then slide them to the back, and think about breathing into your hands in each area. And that will help you to start to facilitate really using your lungs. So your whole thoracic cavity, your whole upper, your chest area should be expanding out to the sides like bucket handles. Your ribs kind of go up and down like a beach pail, but then also in the back as well. And that will allow for your pelvic floor to also relax a little bit, and starting to relax the pelvic floor can have a big effect on, pelvic pain and urinary incontinence. So my biggest tip for new moms is really focusing on your breath. It will help get you into a more relaxed, a more present state, so that you could really stay focused on what's actually happening and not being, in that depressed, what happened in the past type of state, where it can be stuck and feeling that like lower mood, or in that really anxious, what's happening in the future. Let me think of 1,000,001 ways that this can go wrong, because that can happen very easily. And again, back to that enlarged amygdala, like that we want it a little bit enlarged because we need to be more in tune initially. But nowadays, I think, and our society is kind of set up for this way, is that it's easy to overreact to that. And our stresses are a little bit different, right, than they used to be, but our body hasn't caught up to that. So that big, deep breath can bring you more into the present, where you can be in a more calm state, in a more peaceful state. And then also it can help affect your pelvic floor and allow it to heal a little bit better as well.
Amazing.
So it all starts with the breath.
Oh, wow. That is amazing, especially about breathing into the back of it. And then how you said about the diaphragm, and it'll support the pelvic area as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we really are, we are all connected.
Oh, okay. All right.
So a lot of, like, if you're going to do pelvic floor work, it's not necessarily solely focused on your pelvis. So you're going to, you're going to do a lot of whole body work with it.
I love it. I love that. And then that's what you do? Is that what you teach?
Yes, that's exactly what I teach. So I have an 8-week program that brings you through therapeutic exercise, or therapeutically progressed exercises. So we start kind of at the base, level 1, and we kind of work our way up through an 8-week progression. And it, focuses on pelvic floor and inner core work and healing. The exercises are designed to encourage relaxation and movement, and then also build back strength, but slowly and manageably, so that you're kind of really building your foundation.
I like that. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I'm so glad and grateful that you came on board. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, if you don't mind me just sharing a little bit more about the program, because while I do think the 8-week progression is super important, that there is a lot of thought work that goes on in it, as well as weekly yoga, because I feel like yoga for me has always been a big piece to kind of tie the mental and physical body together. And that I think that there's really no time where it's more important and more evident to really kind of connect your mind and body again than in your in your postpartum phase, because of all of the changes that you're going through. So there's an educational component of what you should expect, so that like, what is your body going through physically, what is your body going through mentally, the changes that are occurring in your brain, and as well as a little bit hormonally, what's going on. And then there's a lot of support for your emotional well-being, and with that is mindfulness work, thought work. That way you can really start to be confident in who you are, identify yourself outside of your previous labels of whatever your profession was. I feel like we tie a lot of our identity to that, so it's kind of getting back to the root of who you truly are. And as you kind of gain more confidence in yourself, you're able to stop the second guessing, which can then impact that late night Google session that you're doing. Allow yourself to actually get some sleep, and address your, like I said, your emotional and physical body together, so that they're both moving forward in the same direction, and that your body's not healed and you're doing great, but you're still kind of stuck in this mental emotional struggle. So the program really encompasses all of it. Hold on just a moment.
I love it. That's so great and so needed for sure. And I do like what you said before. Even if you're not struggling, but maybe you just needed to find parts. Maybe you find parts of you, right, that needs it or something. I think it's just very helpful to be able to run an 8-week course with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to do that, that's identifying those parts is really kind of one of the core pillars of it. The core pillars are identifying, integrating, and igniting. So you're really identifying the root causes or identifying your struggles. And we do a lot of work there. And then there's the integration of mind and body. And that's a lot of the physical practice as well as the thought work. One moment. And then there's, the igniting is that final piece. And it's really, igniting your passions, igniting who you are, taking full ownership of that.
Beautiful. Well, I appreciate you so much for your presence and your lovely baby there, and hope she gets better. I hear a little cough.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Wendy. And I do want to share, if it's okay, that for your listeners, if they are inclined to, to join the program, there is room for the 8-week program, which is the Postpartum Revolution, because I do think it's time that we really revolutionize how we are taking care of ourselves in the postpartum journey. That I do have a code that could get them 10% off. So I'll share that with you as well, but it's PodMama22.
Okay, well, give me all that info and then I'll put it in the link, and they can have all your information. Okay. All right.
Great.
Thank you so much. And I hope the audience receives a nugget or two on how to help themselves. So the breath work is absolutely amazing. And anything to bring us back to center who we really are versus the hot mess mom. We don't have to do that.
We definitely don't want to be stuck there, but thank you so much, Wendy. Again, this was an honor to be on here to share some hopefully nuggets of wisdom that your guests and listeners can take.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Arielle. Thank you for taking the time to listen to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast. If you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. It would also mean the world to me if you're able to take a moment and rate and review my podcast on how it was helpful to you. Also, please connect with me on my social media platforms. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next episode.